Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to yet another lecture of web-based decision support system for practitioners. And I am Deepu Phale from IIT Kanpur, and we have been towards the end of towards the last lectures of this course. And we have covered a significant amount of topics which are related to decision support systems that are intended to be used in open business problems, or trying to make help the decision maker to make decisions related to unstructured open business problems. So, if you look into this quickly as a recap, we were working on PHP as the application layer, or the way where we are creating the MBM, the model based management system, and also the application layer that connects the database, the user interface, and the model, etc. So, we saw why PHP is an important because of its server side script and stuff like that. So, if you look into the slides, what we covered yesterday was about PHP, was that it is a server side scripting language, okay, and we also told that it's a loosely typed language, okay, and the reason is the typecasting the variable, the type of the variable doesn't need to be declared specifically. The third reason was it's an interpreted language, interpreted, and that's using the Zend engine, okay. And then we also said that it allows seamless integration of many DBMS, database management system. We mentioned that yesterday, and we also said that it creates dynamic web pages or HTML on the fly. We mentioned these 5 points as the major reason why we choose PHP in this part. So, we are going to go more into PHP today in the lecture, and we want to see what are the additional features associated with the PHP. So, loosely on today's agenda, we will again go through some of the basic syntaxes, data types, control structures, functions, classes and objects, and security and features. This time we won't get into the classes and objects because we don't have time to cover that. It's a whole lecture on its own. So, we will try to stop at functions this time. So, we were looking into many PHP basics yesterday. So, if you look into it today, we are going to start with the loops, but so far we have seen many of the other basics that we have seen so far includes variables, we have seen operators, we have seen logical statements. These logical statements included if else, switch, etc. And we also saw other aspects of creating PHP file, and we also saw embedding PHP in HTML file. We saw both these things. So, these were some of the stuff in the previous lecture. So, today what we are going to do is we are going to enhance that, and we get into what we call as the loops. And loops are very important in any programming language, because most of the time the programmer would like to execute the same block of code, the exact same piece of block of code to run over and over again in a row. So, you would want a specific block of code. This block of code it implements certain logic. Okay. There is some logic with this. So, this same block of code you want to run it over and over again for some specified period of time. So, until the specified termination criteria, okay, you want to do it specific termination criteria. So, how do we do that? So, instead of adding several lines, we do not want to keep on typing these several lines. What we do is we use loops to perform the same task. Let us say I want to print, so let us say echo hello world. Okay. Let us say I have to do this 10 times. One option is I do this like this, okay, and I write like this 10 times echo. You can do this. This is doable, okay. But then the point is, if you want to do 20 times, then you have to redo the code again. Or I create a scenario. So, this is the inefficient way. The efficient way is embed this in a loop, so that it can run for a multiple times. So, in PHP we have 3 major loop statements, and there is one which is specifically meant for associative array. So, the major loop statements are while, let us see, it loops through a block of code while a specified condition remains true. So, it keeps on running until the condition is true. There is a do while, which is different than a while, which again remains, as long as the condition is true, the loop will run, but the difference between while and do while is the do while block will execute the code at least once, whereas the while loop did not, there is no guarantee that at least once the code will be executed. And then there is a for loop. This is used when you know how many times the number of loops to be run. Okay. So, that block of code and we know it need to be run 20 times, then put in the for loop, that is the easiest thing to do. So, these are program logic specific, and the for each loop is specifically it will run through a block of code for each element in an array. Mostly used with associative array. We saw what is an associative array, DBMS query. Okay. That is what you should understand specifically for each, and we will see all these for loop structures in a second. So, let us start with the while loop, the basics while loop. So, as I said earlier, the while loop executes a block of code, whatever is block of code. Again, block of code is a portion that implements some logic. Okay. So, that block of code is executed, and how long it will be executed? While the condition is true. So, the while statement, so this is the keyword, PHP keyword, the while statement, and associated with that there is a condition, whatever be the condition, and this entire code, this is the block of code. Okay. This block of code will continue to be executed until this condition remains true. This condition need to remain true for the block of code to execute. So, there is 2-3 things that you need to remember as part of this. So, here is, let us look at an example. Here is an example of this, right, PHP. So, we have a $i equal to 1. So, remember this is a variable and this is initialized, and again remember loosely typed, implying no need to typecast or declare the type of the variable. So, PHP immediately recognizes that this $i equal to 1, it takes 1 is a integer value. So, it declares $i by in itself as a integer value. So, then you say while $i less than or equal to 5. So, it checks whether I is less than or equal to 5, yes, condition is true. Okay. If that is true, then print the value. So, then what is doing is echo the number is $i. So, it will first print. So, it will say the first run will print the number is $i, it will be 1. okay, and then there is a line break. So, it will come to the next line. Second run, it will say the number is, this is where the $I plus plus. So, ensure that the condition statement of while is updated within the loop body. Okay. So, you have to make sure that whatever be the loop condition, that this point is the, it is a variable that is incremented every time, and so the second run it will become 2, then it will become 3, like this, 4, 5, and as soon as it will print up to 5, and at the fifth run will be print at 5, and then at the sixth this condition will remain false and will exit out of the loop. But make sure that you increment or you update the condition, the while loop condition. Which condition? The while loop condition. That is to be, condition statement need to be updated within the body of the loop. If you do not do it, what will happen? Do not update, what will happen? The loop will run endlessly. Okay. If you do not want to get into an infinite loop, you make sure that the variable condition is updated within the body of the loop, and then we complete the, we exit out of the PHP interpreter. Now, let us see how it differs from the what you call as the do while loop. So, what we seen is the while loop at this point. This starting condition is while the block of code. The major difference between the while loop is that it will always execute the block of code once. Whatever be the condition, the block of code will be executed once. After executing the code, it will check the condition and it will repeat the loop while the condition is true. So, if you take the logic is, in contrast to the while is the statement is here, while the condition, and then you have your block of code. So, the while will only execute this block of code if condition is true. Okay. Do, on the other hand, will execute the block of code once and it checks the condition. Okay. Then after that it checks the condition. So, checking the condition is the second step. Okay. And if it is true, is it true? If it is true, it will go back and execute the code, and it will continue to do this until the condition is false. To make sure that, you have to ensure that the loop variable is incremented, you can say, or updated or modified inside the loop structure, or inside the loop structure means inside the block of code of the loop. So, you make sure that the loop variable is incremented or updated or modified within the loop structure or the block of code. And the other thing is that the initial value of the loop variable can also be different for do while. So, you do not have to, you can have different initial values for the do while compared to while loop, because while loop you have to make sure that the condition is to be true to execute the code once, whereas do, it will execute no matter what once. So, that is the do while loop. So, personally which one do I prefer? I prefer do while whenever the code has to run at least once. If the block of code requires to be done at least once, irrespective of whatever the value is, so then I will make sure that I use the do while. If that condition is not there, only then I go to while. So, I usually prefer do while compared to while. Now, let us look at the next basics of the loop, which is called as the for loop. And for loop is, this is the most commonly used loop structure. Okay. So, in any programming language, whether it is in most programming languages, so not just PHP, C or whatever it is. So, this is the most commonly used loop structure. So, people use it very frequently. And why do you use it frequently? When you know in advance how many times a script should be run or how many times the block of code, script or block of code, if you know how many times the block of code or the script need to be run, then you can use the for loop. And the for loop is a very interesting statement compared to the other one, because the for statement, this is the keyword or the PHP keyword, it has three things within it. For loop statement accomplishes three things in a go. So, it has three parameters. The number one is the init, initialization parameter. So, the init implies initialization of the loop. Most of the time it is the, we also call it as initializing the loop counter. Okay. So, you mostly use this statement to set the counter, and that is at the beginning of the loop statement, or it can be any code to be executed once at the beginning of the loop. So, that is pretty much what it is. Does not have to be the initial statement, you can put code also there, does not matter. Then the second one is the condition. So, the condition is the condition determines whether to continue or terminate the loop execution. Okay. So, we determine whether to continue or stop the loop execution. So, each loop iteration, whenever you go through each loop iteration, this condition gets evaluated, and if it evaluates to true, if the condition remains true, the loop continues. If it evaluates to false, the loop ends. So, that condition is determines whether to terminate or continue the execution of the loop. Then comes the third one, which is called as increment. Increment determines the logic by which the loop counter is increased or decreased. It can increase or decrease, does not matter how it is, does not have to be increment all the time, it can be positive increment or negative increment. So, mostly used to increment the counter, but you can also, instead of incrementing, you can also execute at the a code at the end of the loop, that is also doable for you. So, I can write an example is, if I say for $I is equal to 0, $I less than or equal to 10, $I plus plus. If I say something like this, what it says is initialization, initialize I equal to 0, check. So, this is initialize, and then you do is the check whether I is less than or equal to 10. If it is, execute the code, and then once the code execution is happened, this is increment to next number. You can also write another way, another option is for I is equal to 10, I less than or equal to 0, I minus minus. You can also create a loop like this, dollar, okay. This is PHP. So, we need the dollar sign. Okay. So, it starts at 10, you can decrement it also. So, both are possible with the for loop. Then comes what I mentioned earlier is the for each loop, and the for each loop I told you very clearly that this is a special to PHP and custom built to facilitate querying a database and handling the result of the query. The intended use for each was to facilitate the querying of the database and handling the result of the query. So, how does the result of the query comes in page? How does the query result comes to PHP? Okay. How do you do that? In the form of associative array. Associative array means the key value. So, for each loop is used to loop through the arrays. That is the main aim of this one. Now, how does it happen? The keyword, the PHP keyword is for each, and what it does is it says $array as value. So, this basically says determines how to step through each value of the array. So, what you write there determines how you step through each value of the array, and then this is the block of code. Okay. So, how does this logic works? For every loop iteration, for each one run of the loop. So, when the loop is run once or each time, the value of the current array element. So, you take the current array element whatever it is assigned to $value. So, it goes to the array, find out whatever is the current array element, it gets assigned to the variable $value, and then the array pointer is moved by 1. So, then the pointer is moved to the next one. So, that at the next loop iteration you will be looking at the next array value. All these things, all these are done automatically by PHP. You do not keep track of the array pointer, you do not keep track of the index or anything of the sort. PHP will do all of this for you. This simplifies, considerably simplifies your programming effort. So, let us for example take a $sample is an array of Ramu, Raju, Rita and Mary. So, you can think about it as array 0 is Ramu, etc. like this, and array 1 is Raju, 2 is Rita, array 3 is Mary. Okay. That is what happens. Now, you can write a loop. One way to do it is for $I is equal to 0, $I less than or equal to 3, $I plus plus, you can say echo $sample $I can do this. This is one option. Okay. I can, so I need to decide what is the start, what is the maximum value, the increment, everything. I can do this. This is one option. Okay. This is one option. Instead of that, I can just write one line of statement which says for each $sample is your array as $value. So, it says for each value in the array $sample, take one, assign it to $value and then step to the next. And then all you do is echo $value. So, I do not need to know what is the starting counter, what is the ending counter, what is the incrementation criteria. I do not need to know any of these. In just 2 lines of code, you will step through each element of the array. So, this is more efficient than for loop, because from the programmer standpoint. Not writing large or huge number of code, huge lines of code. So, life is easy with you in this regard. So, most of the time when you do a query result, you will use for each loop. Then we get into what we call as the another basics, which is the functions. What are PHP functions? And one of the real power of PHP is in its functions. Now, this number is beyond 1000, and every day I am pretty sure at least 10 functions gets added to it. 700 plus really powerful built-in functions, built-in and readily accessible. Okay. You don't need to write. If you want to do a decision tree algorithm, or you want to do a what you call as a random forest or k-means clustering, all these things are built in. PHP people, somebody have written this code and it's available readily for you. So, how can you use these functions? So, the function will be executed when you call the function. So, where do you call the function? Where do you call the function? In the main program. Wherever in the part of the main program you call the function, or main program, or you may call the function anywhere within a page or anywhere within a dynamic way. So, which page? Okay. This is the dynamic HTML page. That is the page that we are talking about at this point. So, how do you declare a function? So, you use the keyword function. So, this is the PHP keyword, okay, and the function name. So, typically this is whatever you want to name, the programmer want to name. If you are writing a function ending the square root, so that you may say a function called square root, okay, and put the parameters, and that would be a function. So, you will say function square root, and then within that function, within two curly braces, you put whatever be the block of code to be executed. So, the couple of guidelines is that the function name should reflect what the function does. You should not name a function that finds the square root of a number as my function, or is like weird function. So, name it in such a way that you know, read the name of the function, you know what it is, and this name of the function also when you call it in the program, the name proper naming of function helps to increase readability of the code. Okay. That is a very important criteria from your side. So, when you write the code and when you call the function, you see the code name and then or the name of the function, and you understand what the hell it is. And just like a variable, a function name can start with a letter or an underscore. You cannot start with a number. So, as I said, you can write a function name, you can start it as underscore square root or something like this. This is doable, or you can start with a capital letter or capital small doesn't matters, okay, or an alphabet. It can be either with an underscore or a letter, and you cannot start with a number. So, here is an example. So, here is the keyword is function example. The keyword is family name. So, it is some family name. So, whatever you give the first name of the individual, a family name, a specific family name gets added to it. The variable, this is called the parameter or argument of the function. The parameter or the argument of the function. So, what it does is it takes the f name, first name, and this dot is the string concatenation. Remember, we studied this yesterday. The string concatenation operation or operator. Okay. So, it adds Bachchan, Amitabh Bachchan's last name to this. This is an easy way to showcase. So, in the main program, if I call family name Amitabh, then what it does is it will print Amitabh Bachchan. If you add the family name Abhishek, it will add Bachchan to it and says Abhishek Bachchan, right. That is what the program will output. So, if I say something like this PHP and then I call it as echo my name is, and then I call family name, okay, Jaya. So, what it does is it will print, it will go there and print Jaya Bachchan. So, the output will look like, okay, in the screen the browser will show like this. Okay, it will shows that my name is Jaya Bachchan, whatever. So, you got the point. So, in this case the function does not return anything, the function just prints it and call it good, right. So, the functions can also return a value, particular value. So, at the end of the execution of the function, if you want to let the function return a value to the main program, then use the return statement. So, we declare a function called add, and here is two arguments to this function. The first is $x and $y. So, what this code does is it takes $total is equal to $x plus $y. So, this is the addition operator. So, it takes x and y, sum the values, put it in total, and it says return total. So, return means the function will send this value back from wherever it is called. So, if you say echo 10 plus 12 is equal to, and then this is the string concatenation operator, add 10 12, you call the function. So, the total gets returned here. So, this function will return the value of 22. Okay. So, it will show it as 10 plus 12 equal to 22. This is what it will be shown. You can also, instead of doing all of this can also be replaced as return $x plus $y. This also is fine. You can change it into a single line of code and get it done, and that will also give you the same result. But this is more, this is shorthand and this is readable code, this shorthand code. Both of them will end up giving you the same result. So, with this to the conclusion of the advanced portions of PHP, we stop here purely because of the fact that this should give you sufficient enough stuff to learn and start working on a simple application as part of the web based decision support system. Now, in the coming lectures, we will see how we can access, how we can use PHP to access the MySQL database, and also we will see how to access the HTML web page. Okay. Thank you.